Let me see.
Good evening.
Yo,
I'm Shiva.
yo,
Hello. I
how's it
hope you're all
going,
well.
Shiva?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You got a question or a comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't want to interrupt the conversation that you were having, but
No, you're good. Feel free if you got something on your mind.
just to kind of give you a bit of background, I'm a YouTuber. I have a channel. I'm an atheist, and also a Buddhist, and probably slightly left leaning, maybe compared to you, perhaps. Although I don't really know very much about you. Although I am subscribed to your channel, and I have been for a short while now. But I've been reading the Bible recently, largely because I debate Christians online in kind of blood sport type debates on, just because I enjoy that sort of shit. And there's a passage there are a couple of passages, but one in Leviticus chapter 27, verses 28 and 29, which appear to be saying that you can sacrifice people to God. And so the term that's used, I'll just kind of quickly read out the two verses. 28 reads,
What
nevertheless,
chapter was this?
chapter 27.
Okay.
Nevertheless, any devoted thing a man may devote to the Lord of anything he has, man or animal, or part of the field of his possession, shall not be sold or redeemed. Every devoted thing is most holy to the Lord. And then verse 29 reads, furthermore, people devoted to the Lord shall not be redeemed, but shall surely be put to death. So devoted, I don't know if you prefer the Greek or the Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word is harem, and in Greek, it's anathema, which is where we get our contemporary word anathema from. And so that means something that's been placed under the ban, which means that it can no longer be used. It can't be sold, or in the case of people, they can't be financially redeemed. And so what these two verses appear to be, and also Leviticus 25, I think it's verses 44 to 46. They say that Israelites may buy slaves from the nations around them, which they can own as property and pass on to their children after they die. So,
but real quick though, before we go there,
sure.
I'm at the verse you brought up first, verse 29. I'll read it. It says, none devoted, which shall be devoted of men, shall be redeemed, but shall surely be put to death. But my question is, where does it say the word sacrifice, though? Because you said that we sacrifice.
Sure. So something that's devoted to the Lord, something that's harem or anathema, is that's a votive offering to God. Right. So that's what that word means. It's something that's been put under the ban. It's set aside for God.
Okay, but what's your point with all this stuff? Like, is there a leading point you had to bring us up for?
Well, no, just because I enjoy conversations with Christians. So, like, my question is, does this mean that if you can own people, like Leviticus 25 says you can, because you can buy them, if you can own people and they're your possessions, can you then place those people under the ban, devoting them to God, in which case they are to be killed? Now, just to be clear, when I say the word sacrifice, like, I think if you use the word sacrifice, it kind of evokes images of, blood-stained altars on tops of pyramids and all that, like in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And I'm not like trying to imply that sort of thing. Maybe they're just taken away somewhere and killed, right? But they would be killed as an offering to God.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's killed as an offering to the Lord. I think maybe it's like perhaps maybe if the master passes away and if they're their property or something like that. I mean, it's definitely an interesting point that you bring up there. I can give you that.
Yeah, I mean, although that's not stated in the text, like the text just says that anything that a person owns, whether whether that's a person or a product of crops that they're growing, which is how I'm reading, or part of the field of his possession. That this is, I'm quoting here from the Orthodox Bible, like in other translations, because the Orthodox is translated from the Septuagint Greek, but other versions are translated from Hebrew, and the ones that are translated from Hebrew seem to imply much more strongly that it's talking about the kind of product of plants that you are growing. And so if it's set aside for the Lord, like they can't be sold, they can't be redeemed, and they can't be used. Like that they have to be
Okay, like maybe one way we could look at this is, say if the master that owns them makes them devoted to the Lord, and perhaps if they decide that they're not going to serve the Lord and don't fulfill that duty that they've been devoted to do, then perhaps they could be killed for that. Could that be a reasonable conclusion for it?
No, it sort of depends on how you're seeing the word devoted. Like I don't think the word devoted in this context means, like, I think the word devoted here is a noun rather than an adjective. So it's not talking about an attitude that somebody has towards God. It's saying that they have been devoted. They've been put under the ban. I put under the ban is the term that's kind of used when you look into the kind of Greek and Hebrew terms. That word comes up quite a lot, which kind of means that it can't be used, it can't be sold, and it can't be redeemed. It has to be destroyed.
Okay, I understand. I understand your point. But with that being said, like I wouldn't say this is like some type of major point against the Bible, because at least for people who come over here, we understand that the God of the Bible, he's not all love, right? He's not all love. Like say for instance, a lot of
Right.
people don't know, if you read, I believe it's Second Chronicles 15:13 or First Chronicles 15:13, it says that whosoever does not believe in the Lord, the God of Israel, they should be put to death. So I see a lot of people poke fun of Islam for, Muslims, taking the lives of non-believers, but yet nobody acknowledges that the Bible, on the other hand, talks about the same thing. That's
Yeah,
the
I mean,
denial. So like over here, we
yeah,
acknowledge the Bible for what it says. We're not gonna, tiptoe around it and pretend that everything is lollipops and rainbows. Like say for instance, the God of the Bible even kills children. If you
he
read, what
does.
is
Yeah.
that? Psalms 137 verse 8 and 9.
Well, I mean,
So
you don't even need. Yeah, you can go to Psalms, but also he does it in Exodus, right,
Ezekiel,
where he hardens the Pharaoh's heart,
right.
and then the final kind of plague
Yeah,
is
that's
the
a good point. That's
the
that's a fair
firstborn.
point. He took the life of
Um,
all the firstborn sons.
yeah.
That's a good point.
Also in First Samuel, right, when First Samuel is leading the when Absalom is so David has an affair with Bathsheba, and then
Right.
sends her husband to the front line, and he's killed in the battle against the Syrians, I think. And so God kills his son. Um, uh, he makes his son ill, and then his son dies like a week later. And then in I think it's chapter 12, like maybe verse 10 to 15, somewhere around there. Um, God speaking through the prophet Nathan tells David that he's going to take his wives, that he's going to raise up evil within his household, take his wives, and then give them to somebody, so that and that they're going to have sex with his wives. And then a few chapters later, I think in chapter 16, Absalom, who is David's son, is leading a rebellion, and David flees the city, and so Absalom goes into the castle and then has sex with his wives on top of the roof of the palace. But this is, like that's the story, the narrative around Absalom. I think is another instance where he kills the child as punishment to David, right? Like,
Right, right. I understand. I understand. You said earlier when we came up here that you go on like Christian streams on YouTube. What typically do you bring up there to challenge them when you join these Christian streams? Oh, and by the way, all in for y'all. If you want to add into the discussion, feel free at any time.
Sorry, Alan.
The only thing I was gonna say is that I think I get what you're saying with those two verses, with saying that it's okay to sacrifice human people. I never thought about that when I read those verses, but I do agree with you that, because a lot of Christians will deny that the Bible says it's okay to own slaves, but clearly, yes, it is, according to Scripture, it was permitted to own slaves. And I think it's possible that it's still, I mean, it never really says it's wrong to own slaves. So you are right about that. But yeah, sorry, that was it.
What I tend to bring, so I don't know if you know of a channel called Speakeasy, who's like an Orthodox Christian who hosts what are kind of termed as blood sport debates on his channel on a Friday night. And recently he's kind of started theming the nights, but the kind of debate prompt, like there'll be several debate prompts throughout the night, and they'll be kind of, either philosophical or theological or political in nature. But I tend to argue from either from an atheist perspective, or because I'm a Buddhist who largely subscribes to the Madhyamaka school, which is a school of Buddhist philosophy that arose in the 2nd century CE, AD. And that tends to argue this very kind of particular philosophical view that nothing has an intrinsic existence. Like things exist, they just exist independent upon other things, and so I'll tend to argue from that perspective quite a lot as well. So I tend to be up on there arguing things like morality isn't objective, or God can't be said
can I ask you on that real quick? You said that you're an atheist, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Then you said you're a Buddhist as well?
That's also correct, yeah.
Okay. But could I ask you on that, how could you both be a atheist and a Hindu or a Hinduist?
Well, I'm not a Hindu.
Well, say what you were again, just so I don't.
So Hinduism is a polytheistic religion in which there are lots of gods.
Right, but just bear with me just a second. Like, say for instance, just so I could refresh my mind, I did a quick Google search about it, and it talks about it being a faith, and it says it's a religion and a philosophy that focuses on the teachings of the Buddha, aiming to achieve enlightenment and breaking free from the cycle of suffering and rebirth. But the question I got for that, you even said that it's like multiple gods. But
no, that's Hinduism.
But real quick, the question is, how could you both be an atheist but yet believe that there's like some type of gods or something with this?
This is a kind of common misconception among people who might not be that familiar with Buddhist teachings. There are no deities that you worship in Buddhism. So
what are the gods?
There aren't any.
But I thought you just said that there were many gods in Buddhism.
No, that's Hinduism. That's a different religion.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm saying I looked up Buddhism, and it refers to it as a faith and a religion.
Yeah, faith is a very important part of Buddhism. The word in Pali is Sada, or in Sanskrit it's Shraddha, and that's often translated as faith. And it's said to be.
Wouldn't you consider yourself agnostic though? Because if you're an atheist, that means that you would deny the existence of any type of religions and deities, though, right?
No. Atheism is just the rejection of a singular proposition, right? So if you add that proposition relating to the existence of a God, so if you come to me and you say there is a God and he has these qualities and these characteristics, and then I say, well, can you prove that? And then you say no, then my response is, well, I just don't believe you. That's not me saying that I know there's no God. So it might be more accurate to describe myself as an agnostic atheist, in that I don't know if there is a God or not, but I do know that I don't believe
Right,
in any of the gods that have been presented to me.
right. I understand what you're saying, but all I'm saying is it would seem more reasonable to call yourself agnostic, because that means is that you're like on the fence. There might be gods, there
I'm
might
not.
not be, because
No,
but I'm saying, just hear me out real quick. Like, say for
sure.
instance, I did a quick Google search to refresh my mind on the meaning of atheism, and it
Hmm.
responded and said atheism is the disbelief in the
Yeah,
existence of any god or gods.
yeah.
So you see, like, where the confusion comes in there.
Well, all of the gods that have been presented to me so far, I don't believe in. I have a disbelief in them. So that
Okay.
makes me an atheist, right? And like, and
Yeah,
I think the
right, I understand
conflation
that, but
of
the place where I'm getting a
agnosticism
little
with,
confused is
sorry,
you're
I,
basically saying that you're on the fence, like there could be some type of God. That's why I was saying maybe it makes sense to go by the term of agnostic, meaning you're on the fence, you're not really sure. Like I'm just saying that that would make more sense by definition with
well,
what you call yourself.
I think the issue for me is that quite often people put um, theism, the belief in the God, and atheism, the disbelief in a God, and agnosticism, not knowing whether there's a God or not, as being part of the same category. And I think that's a category error, because theism and atheism, they relate to belief, and agnosticism relates to knowledge. And so you are right. I don't know if there's a God or not, but I would argue that neither do you. However, I would imagine that even if you were willing to say, yeah, I mean, I can't really know if there's a God, but I certainly believe there's a God, that would make you a theist, right? So, and similarly, you know whether you believe or not. And so similar, like the same would apply to me. Like, I might not know if the universe was created by a being, but I do know that I don't believe in any of the gods that have been presented to me as being real. Does
Okay,
that make
fair
sense?
enough. Fair enough. I understand your reasoning. So, to piggyback on something I brought up earlier, like you
Mhm.
said that you go on Christian panels for conversation. So, like, what are some of the
Yeah.
stuff that you bring up on there that you like try to criticize the Bible besides the 2 points that we brought up earlier? Is there like any other talking points you go to criticize the Bible, or what?
I mean, generally, I would argue that um, that I don't think the Bible is true. Like, for one thing, it's riddled with contradictions, um, and I don't like, leaving aside the issue of whether God exists or not. If he does exist, if I grant the existence of God, I don't think that God, as he's described in the Bible, can be said to be good. And I don't think that any system of morality or ethics that comes from a being, and I think theists would generally tend to agree that God is a being. Like, if he's a being, then any system of morality that comes from that being must necessarily be subjective, unless you define objective as being just something that originates from outside oneself. But in that case, any book could be an objective source of morals, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious when anybody reads the Bible that the laws in the Bible are subjective, right? God comes up with them at his own will. Like say for instance, um, like the Bible forbids shaving your facial hair or getting tattoos. Now, as to
Right,
why God decided that, that's not up for me to decide, as to why he determined that. But as me,
right.
as a believer of that, I have to hold to those regulations and guidelines. So yeah, I mean, it's obvious that the God of the Bible, he determines his regulations and his morality, based on his, mind and his values and in his ways, which of course his ways are higher than our ways, as it says. But yeah, it would be subjective as to, his own reasoning why he comes up with it. As I said,
Well,
to give an example, there might be some meats out there that might not physically cause the body harm, but God said that we can't eat it. So as to why he decided that, I can't say, I don't know. But according to what the scriptures say, we'd have to, go in accordance with it.
Well, you're the first theist who's ever acknowledged that a system of morals that
I
comes
mean,
from a
don't think
being
that
must be
it's something.
subjective.
Let me say this though. I don't get what the point is about the whole argument between not being subjective. Like I don't get why anybody would argue
Because
that it's not subjective.
I think it's my take on it is that it's kind of rooted in a few things. I think if you don't agree that morality is objective, then it becomes difficult to assert that a given act is intrinsically wrong.
Well, let me say this though. There are certainly parts in God's law that you would just say like if it's not subjective, what's the other word that you give it?
Objective. Well, there are three words that are often used interchangeably to describe Christian morality, and that's objective, absolute, and universal.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't go by all those terms, but there are certainly laws in the Bible that wouldn't be just subjective. Like, say, for instance, the fact that it would be wrong to murder another person, right? Everybody knows that that's just not right to do, or to steal from another person, or to take another man's wife. Stuff like that is just, known that that's not right. But then, on the other hand, there certainly are laws in the Bible that, God came up with. As to why he came up with them, I'm not sure, but they would be subjective to God's morality on many different laws in the Bible. But then there are certainly other ones that are clear for why they would be determined that way. But then there are certainly laws in the Bible that might, leave somebody scratching their head as to, well, why would God say that, we can't, wear a hat and pray at the same time, or why can't we shave our facial hair, or, so on and so forth. So those would just be determined by God's morality, which again, I'll stress is higher than our ways. So in no way are we to talk down upon that at all. But, I don't get
Well, I
why
don't mind.
anybody who claims to read the Bible would claim that it's not subjective. I mean, it's obvious that God's regulations, they were made by him. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't get that.
I mean, me neither, which is why I argue the point. But like I say, you're the first Christian who's ever just come out and said, yeah, no, I agree. They're subjective. Do you think that God is good?
Yeah, the Bible says that God is good, but here's the dilemma, because the Bible teaches that God does both good and bad. It creates both the good and the evil. So anybody
Yeah, and
claiming
like
that God is
Isaiah.
just good, they clearly are in error and don't know the Bible. So God does both good and can do bad. That's what the
So
Bible.
is God evil sometimes?
Well, again, it would depend on what you mean by that, because, say, for instance, when God does evil things to people, that's not sin for God to do that, because he's doing it for a reason. Like, say, for instance, if a man dies in a bad accident, there's a reason why that happened to him. So somebody that doesn't know that guy's life story might say, well, yeah, that's terrible what happened to that guy. Why would God let something like that happen? But if you know that that guy might be, top a gang member or doing shady things on the internet behind the scenes his whole life, then it might make a little bit more sense why God would bring such a harsh judgment down upon somebody. So again, it
But
would just determine what you mean by that.
I mean, that sort of argument would be much more difficult to make in the case of, say, like David's son, right? Because being an infant, he
Well,
wouldn't have had the chance.
there's the other thing though, is I over here hold to something called reincarnation, where we believe
Right.
that you could be judged for your past sins. So like, say for instance, if you read I believe that's John or Luke, the 9th chapter. The apostles were walking with Christ and they found a man who was born blind. And they asked Christ, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or because of his parents' sins? So it showed they had an idea that you could be born with a disfigurement or a disability based upon your own actions.
And what was Jesus's response to that?
Well, in that particular instance, he said, this man was born this way so I could show a miracle. But it shows that the apostles had a concept that a person could be born with a disfigurement based upon their own actions from a past life. It shows they had the idea that could be the reason why he was born that way.
Right. Okay.
The
All right.
cultural.
I'm reading it now. Now this is from the NRSV update, the new Revised Standard Version. I don't know what your preferred
Well,
Bible
I
is.
read out of the King James, so I'm not sure what that one would say.
Okay. Well, this says, chapter 9. As he walked along, he saw a blind man. He saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him." The idea, though, that this implies some sort of reincarnation sort of doesn't make sense, because presumably, at least until he was born, at least his mother was alive, right? Like she had to have been
Right.
alive in order to carry him to term, unless your position is that you can be reincarnated before you've actually died.
Well, once again, when I bring up reincarnation, it's not just being hinged on this one verse here. I just brought up to show that the apostles had a concept that a person could be born with a disfigurement based upon a sin that they committed. Then it would bring up the question, well, how could they be disfigured at birth for something they did if they're just being born now? Well, the answer would be because they lived in the past. And so again, as I agreed, in this particular instance, this man was born this way so Christ could show a miracle. But I'm just showing they have the concept that a person could be born with a disfigurement based on something they themselves did. That's why I went there.
That's really interesting. Do you have any other are there any other passages in the Bible
Yeah, I mean,
that
like say
seem to
for
imply?
instance, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other points that could be brought up about reincarnation. Like say for instance, John the Baptist, Christ said that he was Elijah. If you read Matthew chapter 17 and verse 10, Christ said this was Elijah. Now, John the Baptist, he didn't know that he was, because his past life was hidden from him. I believe it says in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 11, it says the former things are not remembered. So he couldn't remember his past. He couldn't know that he was that man. That was blocked from his memory. But Christ said that he was him. So that's an example of what I'd say would be reincarnation. Christ said this was him, right? The man from the Old Testament. What's your take on that?
I'm just reading the verse now. Let me get is it the King James that you like?
Yeah, and again, it's Matthew chapter 17, verse 10.
Verse 10, and so all right. So verse 10, and his disciples asked him, saying, "Why then say the scribes that Elias must come first, or must first come?" And Jesus answered and said unto them, "Elias truly shall first come and restore all things. But I say to you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them." Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. Right, so he's saying that John the Baptist is Elias. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let me give you another example. You're familiar with John the Revelator, and he died on the island of Patmos that he was imprisoned on, right? Or at least
No,
supposedly, because you don't believe in it, right?
I mean, no, I'm kind of fairly new to reading. So I've currently got 3 Bibles, which is 3 more Bibles than I ever thought I would ever own. But I've only really started studying the Bible in earnest like this probably in the last month. So I'm fairly unfamiliar with vast swathes of it. Yeah.
Right. I understand it. That's fine. Hey, we all got to start somewhere, man. So, it's good to, hear these verses. But I got another one for you. So, John the Revelator got imprisoned by the Romans on the island of Patmos, and he wrote Revelation there, and he died on that island. There's no record of him ever escaping and, living somewhere else, right? As
Right.
far as we know, he died there. But this brings up an interesting point. This is Revelation chapter 10. I'll start at verse 10 and 11. It says, "And I took the little book out of the angel's hand, and I ate it up, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And the angel said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many people and nations and tongues and kings." So the angel told him that he's going to have to go again before many peoples and nations and kings to prophesy before them. So the question is, if he died on that island, then how did he go and preach before those nations again? we'd say that he came back in the future and prophesied before those nations and kings.
So
We'd
who
say
is
this is
who is
another
the
example
angel
of it.
here?
Who's
Because
the angel? Let me see.
because I know that sometimes when at least in the Orthodox Bible, when it talks of the angel of the Lord, that's a reference to the Son of God. So is
Well,
that what's being implied here?
let's read verse 7. It says, "But
Mhm.
in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, that the mystery of God should be finished, as he had declared to his servants the prophets." So let's see. I'm just trying to see if I can find a verse. Okay, I'll read verse 8 and 9. It says, "And a voice which I heard from heaven spoke unto me, saying, Go and take the little book out which is open in the hand of the angel, which stand upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel, and he said unto me, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it make thy belly bitter." Yeah, but it doesn't say the name of the angel. It just says that he went to the angel. So it doesn't give us the name of it, at least
So
from what I'm seeing.
so that could just be a created angel then, rather than a manifestation of God.
Well, I'd say that God has many different angels. So when we see John or other people in the Bible talk to angels, I mean, I'm yet to see one where it would just be God, but referring to him as an angel. I wouldn't hold that perspective.
Isn't it? Doesn't that happen in the Old Testament though? So like in like a few times in
Let's, just so I understand, are you saying that like God would appear and it would call him an angel? Just so I understand.
yeah, at least according to the Orthodox tradition, which is the Bible that I'm reading. So they seem to hold the view that there are that there are two sorts of angel references in the scripture. So you have created angels, and they're just like angels, right? But then you have sometimes there's reference made to the angel of the Lord, and when you read the words the angel of the Lord, that's meant to be synonymous with the Son, capital S.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I wouldn't necessarily agree to that because we see other ones where it talks about like Michael as like the chief angel. So
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily agree to that. We see Christ called like the Son of Man or Son of God, or other titles given to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I just say the angel just can. It depends on the usage. Like say for instance, even the word God depends on the usage. Like say for instance, the Bible calls Satan God. Second Corinthians chapter 4 verse 4 says the God of this world has blinded the minds of them who don't believe. If you read, I believe it's Exodus chapter 7 verse 1, God told Moses that I will make you a god unto Pharaoh.
Right.
So there's a lot of different uses for the word God, or even today for the word angel. Well, hell, we even call people angels. Like that kid's a little angel, right? It
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't literally mean that they're like a heavenly angel, but it just like metaphorical usage for the word. So I'd say it just depends upon the usage in the sense.
There's another instance where an action of God is later attributed to Satan. So in 2 Samuel, um, chapter 24, it's talking about how David conducts a census of the Israelites, and this annoys God, and then he kills 70,000 of them. But the first verse of that reads, "And the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, Go number Israel and Judah." But the same story is also told in First Chronicles, in chapter 21, where rather than attributing that to God, it says, "Now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel." So yeah, right.
Right. That's an interesting point. That's where the Christian probably would struggle to explain that, but we can explain it and say that we teach that Satan's like a worker for the Lord. Satan does God's bidding. Like, say, for
Yeah,
instance, if you read Job 2, right, Satan
yeah,
went and
yeah.
tempted Job, and God gave him the permission to do that. So I just say that Satan went on God's behalf, but that would stump a Christian. I'll give you credit on that. An average Christian would struggle to probably answer that question because they don't know. They think that Satan, fell from heaven with, millions of angels in a rebellion against God. But the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible teaches, hell, even if you read James chapter 2, It literally says even the devils and demons, they fear and believe on Christ. So how the hell were they in a rebellion against Christ if even they fear and believe on him? You know, it doesn't make any
I
sense.
think that's that might be largely down to writers like Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost, which
Right,
is a kind of
I've heard
epic
of that.
poem. Yeah, and in the kind of first part of that epic poem, that's all about like the fall of man and the fall of Lucifer and the kind of rebellion. You know, I always thought that Paradise Lost would make a kick-ass movie, and I've no idea
Oh
why
yeah,
Hollywood.
yeah. Hell, don't get me wrong, man. Some of that Christian mythology would make for some classic, TV shows and series. Don't get me wrong on that. That's true. But yeah, man. You got any other point or anything?
No, I mean, I suppose I've seen what I'm mostly aware of you for is uploading premieres, and I'd never seen you go like live before, so I just wanted to come and say hello, really.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Hello.
But yeah, man, Shiva, it's good talking to you. Even though we're of different, worldviews, we can get along and have respectful, conversation, even though we might hold opposing viewpoints. I always like to do these open panels for people of opposing views to, come together and reason together. And by the way, feel free to re-upload this conversation to your channel. And what was the name of your channel, by the way, so I can check you out?
My channel is the Church of Four. Just to warn you, it might seem a little bit schizophrenic. So what I used to do on YouTube was, because I first started doing YouTube from first of all scam baiting and then commenting on the activities of First Amendment auditors, and then when COVID hit and everyone started doing panels, that kind of eventually morphed into bullshit drama. And so there are a few streams that are up on my channel that are bullshit drama, but I've been trying to step back from that and kind of do more content where we're talking about ideas, because I find that interesting. Do you have a Discord server?
Yeah, I do got a Discord. I can't give a link on here because it's on a different device. So what you can do is after the stream, you can leave a comment, and then I can send you the link from the comment.
Yeah, will do. All right, lovely chatting with you. I'll see you later.
All right, cool. Have a nice day, Shiva.